Awesome. Thanks, Damon. So yeah, the topic being extended realities. I'll give you a little bit of background for myself. So Marc Kinsman, I work for Mortenson, and I'm an emerging technologies developer. So there's a couple things to unpack there. Who is Mortenson? Mortenson's a large general contractor, I think in the at least top 25 in the US. We do a lot of large commercial stuff, stadiums, renewables. So we have a little bit of our finger in everything. And then my group within that is Virtual Insights. And what we do is work with emerging technologies and work all around the company to help our customers kind of solve some of their problems. And so one way we have been doing that lately is XR, or extended realities. So I never know really where people are in their journey of this. So I think it's probably good for us to level set and just get some quick basics out of the way. And then once everyone's on the same page, we can have some more talk about it. But you might have heard a lot of different acronyms: VR, AR, MR. Collectively, we like to call that XR. And so just a really quick look at what that means is if we look at a continuum of kind of where our reality is to everything being virtual, there's kind of steps along the way. So that augmented reality portion is quite near the beginning, where mostly you're in the real world, but we start to layer in some sorts of virtual components. And then as you do more and more, eventually you get to that 100% virtual piece where everything around you is kind of synthetic in nature. And I always like to remind people when we're thinking about this, usually we're thinking about the sense of sight. What does it look like? How much are we seeing? But we do have to remember that really anything about this augmented and virtual continuum extended realities is it's fooling any of our senses. So it can be our touch, our sound, taste and smell we really haven't got to yet. I'm kind of nervous to when we do, and we talk about that in the realm of construction sites. But sight is definitely the one that we're talking the most about. So why does this become important within construction? And kind of our journey, or my journey through that, is when I was a VDC practitioner and I was doing a lot of stuff, and I realized how silly it was, the amount of effort and the time we put into creating 3D models and then flattening those into 2D and looking at them on a screen or talking to them with other people on a screen. It just took away that level of effort that we put in there. And so when I put on a headset for the first time and was able to step into a model and make it really feel like the real world, I could see how big of a change that would be. Again, if we look in contrast to the old time, you could zoom around, you can fly around, sure, but many times I'd find myself looking in there and I'd try to be routing some sort of pipe or duct or something. Say, oh, well, maybe we'll be able to squeeze it through this gap between one or two other things. And the rest of the team would look at me and say, are you kidding me? Measure that, use the actual tool, and it would be a 1/16 of an inch, half an inch maybe, and I'm trying to get something much larger through there. So you lose that sense of scale. But when you're in VR and everything's true 3D, it's pretty hard to lose that even when you're seeing it at different sizes. And it really changes the way that we perceive our virtual world, and we can get a lot of value out of that. So what I wanted to do first, as I said, kind of getting some of the terminology out of the way and level set here on what's big and what's important. The different types of headsets has been confusing for some people, as I might recommend something or another, or work with a project team. There's different things you can buy, and there's different things that they're good for. And there's not one that's strictly better than all the others, although I think it's getting close. So the first one that I like to talk about is 3 degree of freedom headsets. And these are pretty much the early VR headsets that are around. A lot of people might have seen these. The Samsung Gear VR or the Google Cardboard, and they would often use your phone and you put it in, and that 3 degree of freedom is 3 axes of rotation. So you can look left to right, up and down, or you can kind of tilt your head sometimes, and you can stay in one place, but you can look around you, and that can be pretty useful. But if you start to do more or try to do more than that, you can get pretty motion sick. But there is one technology that kind of really works with that very well. And so I never want to discount these. And that other technology is photospheres. So a photosphere or a 360 photo is kind kind of an image taken from one location, but all the way around it. And so you can render these, or you can take them with cameras, and basically at one point you can look anywhere. And so that works really well with a technology that only lets you look but doesn't let you walk. It can become pretty immersive and pretty useful. And then if you want to go somewhere else, all you do is have another photosphere and be able to teleport to that location. So you kind of hop and skip around and look at a space. But very low tech, very easy to produce, and you can move pretty quick with these and get some good results. The next level, though, that I find a little bit more exciting for a lot of people is 6 degree of freedom headsets. So those extra 3 degrees of freedom that we're adding in here are the positional. So can we move forward and back? Can we move left to right? Can we move up and down, as well as all of our different rotations? So for a longest time, this was pretty much PC based. You'd have to have a really powerful PC to do this, lots of cables and cords, but more stuff's coming out right now, like the Oculus Quest, that while it's less powerful, it can still do a lot of the 6 degree of freedom things. And within that, you're also going to typically have some controllers. And so you can see where your hands are as well as move your head around. So it's a very immersive tool. And we're kind of striding in 2 ways to do this right now. So the first way that one might use a 6 degree of freedom headset, especially in the construction industry, is to use what I call a one-click solution. So there's a couple of them different out there, Iris VR, the Wild, but the idea is you might be in Revit or some other authoring tool, you click one button and all of a sudden you can put on your VR headset and look around, explore a little bit. Typically, these are software as a service, so you have to pay for them, and you can move around, and they do offer a good sense of presence. Now, it's not going to be super high fidelity in the most cases because it's just taking what you have in Revit, or it might not be able to handle a lot, but it's a really easy way to get in and a really good way to work with your teams, to work with your owners, with your designers, and figure out kind of some problems you might have. If you find those to be too limiting, I would say, you also have the option of going to a game engine, just making it full from scratch. That's what my department does. That's kind of how we got ourselves started. And the reason for this is absolutely anything's possible. You're making a video game from the ground up, but it takes a lot of skills. It takes a lot of programming effort, takes a lot of good modeling effort. It's a very different style of modeling than we do in the construction industry. It's mesh modeling as opposed to kind of CAD modeling. But the results are amazing. And so you can do some really cool stuff, and we'll talk about some of those later and kind of what I've been working on with that. Now, let's shift gears and let's look at augmented reality. So there's a lot of excitement around augmented reality. Virtual reality has been around for a while. There's a huge kind of surgence in AR for a while with Pokemon Go. That's why I wanted to throw the image here, and that's one type of it. But then it kind of died down, and many people ask what's going on with it. So there's 2 categories of augmented reality. There's video see-through AR. This is the type that you're going to have on your phone. You're going to look at your phone. You're going to see through the camera of your phone. So it's going to be some sort of video mode, and then you're going to layer things on top of that. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and it can be pretty easy, but also doesn't always feel that immersive because you're really kind of looking at a video, and how do you tell that that's kind of any different than if someone just took a video of something and edited it? What makes that kind of realistic and real time? One thing that it does work well with, though, is another technology that's out there called markers. And that's a way to kind of align the real world with this virtual world. So a marker is an object like you can see in that image, can be looking like a QR code or something else. And what you do in your application is you can align basically the object you want to see with where it should be in reference to where that marker is. The camera will see where the marker is in the real world, do all the math for you, and you can be able to see your 3D objects. So there's varying levels of accuracy here. How close are you? How large is it? How detailed is your marker? But they can do a good number of things. And what we find to use them a lot for is if we want to have large groups of people be able to view our job sites and kind of see things from the outside point. So they have these various viewing platforms or viewing areas. You can download an app. You can hold up your phone and look at our building in construction. You can see as it's finished. So while it's costly to set up, it's very cheap to deploy and have many people use it. Our second category of augmented reality is optical see-through augmented reality. And this is where instead of looking at a screen with a video feed, you're actually going to have some sort of media in front of you that you're going to project onto. So these are devices like the Meta or the HoloLens. There's just a glass screen in front of you that you're seeing through, just like sunglasses, but they can project onto the glass screen whatever your holograms are around you. And it feels a little bit more immersive. What's also nice about it is because it's very much tied to where your eyes are and everything, it's going to take the form of a head-mounted unit, freeing up your hands and the ability to do stuff. So as far as construction goes, we see this having the most application, the most options for us, and we're really excited about it. The problem is the technology is just not quite there yet. It's getting there, but there's still a bit to go. So I don't have kind of that great killer use to use because we're still exploring this one. It's going to be why we say it has the most on-site applications is because we do at least know it's going to be the safest. So if you're doing VR and you're in a 100% virtual world, you can't be on the job site because there's no way you can do that safely. If you're doing the video see-through AR, you're looking through a phone and you're really focused on something else. So it's going to be hard to do that safely as well. But if you just are doing your normal thing in your everyday world and you can have extra information and extra holograms layered in there, you can do that pretty safely. So we think once that technology is there, this is really the goal we're working towards. I've mentioned a little bit about kind of how it was when I got started. I think that was, maybe 6 years ago. Don't quote me on the exact time. It was around the time of the DK2, the early Oculus devices. And as we started playing with these technologies and exploring, it very much looked like this picture where we're in a dark closet. We have just cables going everywhere and no one really wants to participate in this. And so while we got some early information, it was hard to get our owners and our designers in there. But lately, we've kind of moved more towards this. I do have to give a call out. This was an image that was made by Skanska in Studio 216, so I'm just borrowing it from them. But I think it really does go to set the vision for what the use of this technology can kind of be, especially when you're starting to play with AR. It's this normal environment. You might be talking about something, but you need to look a little bit more in depth into the models. You need to be able to jump in there in some way, and you can kind of just bring it up and work through it. And this leads to this gradual shift I've been seeing in the industry, or paradigm shift, I should say, of the uses of extended reality. So when it first came out, everyone's really excited, of course, but the actual use cases were pretty thin. Almost all of them were architectural visualization. Can we bring someone in to walk around and look around? It'd be very neat, pretty inspiring to see stuff. It could be at different levels of fidelity, but ultimately not super useful or at least reusable. Someone will go in and they say, oh, now I understand the space, cool, and I'm gonna dip out of here because I have other stuff to do. So you get that sense of presence of like I'm standing there, but once you get that, there's not really much value from repeating that. Where we're seeing the industry start to move and some of the vendors and some of the more advanced practitioners is towards a collaboration movement. So it's more than just, hey, can I move an object around, but really, can I get multiple people in the same space working together, having these important deep conversations, being able to facilitate those conversations, other tools and abilities for that, and really having that space respond to multiple people in there doing the work that they need to do. So this has been pretty exciting as an idea, and I think I'm going to use a little bit of this as a jumping point for you can see the history of what I've done with VR and kind of how that's influenced that. But just always be thinking, if you're going to start to use VR or AR or talking about something with it, what are the use cases? Is it just a cool, neat tool to look at stuff, or can you do more with it? Oh, I guess I should further mention within this realm of extended realities, there's kind of the even larger realm of emerging technologies. I did mention at the start that my title was emerging technologies developer as opposed to extended realities developer. And that's because we're a pretty big believer as more different technologies come out, they're going to further reinforce all of themselves, kind of self-reinforcing. So right now we're looking at extended realities as a great way to visualize and understand stuff, but can we use sensors and IoT to feed better information in? Can we use reality capture to improve the quality of our virtual worlds and kind of get towards that augmented virtuality state? So always be paying attention to what else is coming down and start to think about, well, how could I use VR or AR as a great visualization tool for one of these other technologies? So, but I'm just going to jump straight into some of the actual concrete examples of what we've done with these tools and some of a little bit how that's evolved over time, just to give some people ideas, because I think we often will get stuck in, well, I can use this to look at it, but what are further tools? How could I use this to make money? How can I use this to make decisions? So very early on in our career with this, we did some stuff with 360 photos. As I said, that was kind of that early stage where you can look around and start to see things, and then teleport to different areas. So we worked with some Major League Baseball stadiums and helped them build a tool that they could use in their sales centers to try to sell these suite spaces early. It worked pretty well. People were pretty excited about it. But then we kind of turned inward and we started looking at how might we use that on our own job sites. And so we developed a safety tool where we were asked to identify job site hazards. And so the goal here is, yes, it's easy for someone to use the tool, but more importantly, it's easy to create these new quizzes and tests. So we actually have a web-based portion as well to create these. And so it's very easy to jump in, do some quick learning on something, and then move on to the next step. I think this is going to show kind of our little platform for creating new quizzes. And so this is more recent. As I said, we don't want to forget that 360 photos and 3 degree of freedom headsets are out there. They can be used, but it's a very specific use that you want to have. Some of the things that are probably more similar to one-click, we haven't really done too much recently, but this is kind of the level of fidelity you might be able to see in most one-click solutions. And even with that, you could use it for different things. So we've worked with a university at one point and took some of the early models in there, brought them into VR really quickly, and they used that for fundraising. So they actually would bring that to potential donors and have them come in and say, hey, how neat is this building? Wouldn't it be cool if that building had your name on the front of it? And it only takes X amount of dollars to make that happen. And so that's been a pretty valuable tool. Another one that's kind of on that lower fidelity side, but a little bit more interactive, just moving stuff around with multiple users, is space planning, especially for healthcare. Their different ICU rooms and surgery rooms are very compact. They're going to try to get as much stuff in there as possible. And so it's a great tool to really quickly be able to bring a couple of nurses and doctors in and have them set up for different scenarios and surgeries. And they can do that very quickly. And you can actually do a lot of cool data insights on the back end if you're thinking about it that way. So this is a product that we're still developing more on that data side, and the back end is where we think the value is going to be. But what I like to show people are kind of make obvious is that how it was just all gray. And even then you can get a lot of value out of something without trying to make it look super fancy. And oftentimes that's where some of the cost comes. This one's a little bit more basic, but it's on the other side of the building spectrum than we've been talking about recently, which is working with facilities. And so how with facilities can you get them in ahead of time? Can you get them to understand their new space? There's this huge pressure once a building's coming online to start doing your maintenance early, your preventative kind of checks and all that. And so going through and familiarizing the team with that, getting them to understand how things flow, tracking down different systems, and they go looking at valve locations. This is a really easy way to do that. Right now, a lot of teams would probably be using something like Navisworks, but it's just a different experience when you can actually have the user stand in it and see how they feel with it. I'm going to try to speed up, I think, a little bit of some of these because I don't want it to get too repetitive. But this was a project, it looks a little bit more high fidelity. It was for a hotel owner. But what I wanted to highlight here and have people think about is, as I said, that venturing into collaboration tools, and how is it, instead of going in VR all by yourself and looking at something, how does it change when you work with other teams, when you start to try to make decisions? And so we had some areas where you could swap for different kind of design variations and look at that, and then built a tool where you could do markups in real time. And we've discovered a couple different uses of markups. And if anybody wants to see kind of an easy way to do it without having to develop it themselves, the Wild is one of those kind of one-click-ish solutions for VR, and they have a lot of tools like this implemented. But the ability to draw things and spatialize them, the ability to leave comments and kind of talk into the system, and then the ability to kind of do basic models and sketching of things out are all different important modes for collaboration in VR to be exploring. Another project for a university, that's kind of a core of what a lot of Mortenson does. But for this project, the goal here was to make some decisions. And the reason why I like to keep this one is to tell a little bit more of a story. So this is a story of classic rendering versus immersive spaces. So as you can see a little bit of what they're looking at, there's a bunch of glazing right near this rock climbing wall. This was for Penn State University. And they're building this new intramural center. And that was kind of one of the focal pieces, is that big climbing wall, especially when it was dark out and it's all lit up. How does that look? And that color scheme was an important piece of the design. And so there were some renderings that were made of, here's our different options of coloring, and the team made a choice. But I think ultimately our project manager felt like that wasn't going to be the right one, and so asked us to do this quick VR exercise where you can swap between those options. And come to find out, once those decision makers were able to move around a little bit more, explore, see it from more angles than just a couple renders, they ended up changing their mind. They thought they liked one style, and then they ended up going for another. And because we did it in VR, we were able to do it early enough and make those changes with really no cost impact. This is more of a common one, I feel like. So this was a hotel that we did in Seattle, and the mock-up process can be quite difficult, especially depending on your owners. And there's this big iterative cycle to it. So you're going to mock some things up, you'll get comments, and then you'll have to change some things. You have to wait for us to rebuild it. And then on top of that, most mock-ups, because they can be quite expensive, you're going to really figure out a set of cases or all conditions in the smallest space possible. So it's not really true to what the building's going to be, but it looks at all those different conditions and how you're going to experience those. So when we were entering that process with this owner, we said, hey, because of our experience in this, and we know, can we do one virtually first and work out some of the basic kinks? We're not trying to replace the physical mock-up process. We just want to start here. We can move a little bit faster, do it a little bit easier. And as we worked through that process, we actually eventually got to the point where the owner said, I actually feel comfortable. Let's not spend the money on the physical. We did everything. It was full scale. We kind of learned what we would at the small scale. And on top of that, we figured out some other issues that wouldn't have been found in the mock-up, and I feel really comfortable with this. So let's keep proceeding. Training, this is back towards the facilities. I should maybe reorder some of these, but this is where we're starting to get pretty interactive. So instead of just bringing the facilities through to look at everything, this was a specific need and worry of that owner. As a high risk area, this is in a utility plant. This is what they call medium voltage switchgear, which is more than enough to kill you if it goes wrong. And this huge bank. So the idea was, how do we lock out and tag out one of these specific boxes? The key and the uniqueness for this customer was that this was a remotely operated plant and their main plant was not. And so there were some very subtle differences that if you treated this new plant like you were used to the old plant, you actually ran some pretty high risks. And so the question was, how can we train people who are not on site to do it correctly the first time, especially in the event of emergency when they'd need to be out here? And so we built it in VR, had all the logical steps that they'd have to work through, kind of gamified it, made a random choice. They had to do it within a certain amount of time and work through those steps. And they found it pretty valuable. I don't think that's the only way that they went through it, but building this custom kind of training tool was pretty cool, and I think they learned a lot. As far as training goes, this is one that we've been working on internally, and it's for concrete inspections. So it's more generalized, but it teaches our process. It goes through and says, okay, what are you going to do first? How are you going to figure out things? It has a bunch of those different components to teach our new engineers. And the reason why we started to go after this was it's not always that you have kind of I'm just going to make sure that this is not playing sound, that you're not always going to have that perfect place to teach, or your teacher's not going to be ready at that time. So how can we make that a little bit easier for having anybody around the country be able to teach anybody in kind of a standardized way? And this is using or making heavy use of a new kind of technology that we've been working on and actually started working on with an arena that we're building in Seattle, a new NHL arena. And what we did here, I mentioned a little bit ago, the Oculus Quest, and we're quite enamored with that device. It does a lot of things really well. The big piece being it's quite cheap to implement. It is standalone and that you don't need a computer for it, but still 6 degrees of freedom. And so it does all of its own tracking in an inside out method with cameras built into the device. You can actually turn off the Guardian system, the safety system on it. And we've been working in a space that's probably about 100 feet by 50 feet. So you can really open up the size of what you're doing in VR. And then we've written some special code to still locate all of the people who are in that space together. So the real world is aligned with the virtual world. And so as they walk around and talk through things and point at things, they can kind of all do that in a group and together. And this has really changed the way we've seen a lot of these experiences. Before, it's been, we'll get someone in there, they'll stay in for maybe 5 minutes, they'll look around real quick, they'll take off the headset and pass it to someone else. And, oh, okay, I don't need to do that anymore, I've kind of seen it. In this case now, when it's this simple and this easy to set up, and you can tell it's not even that high fidelity. The later versions of this, we've added in color and everything as we've progressed through the design process. We have people who will jump in there for their first time and spend an hour with the group talking through everything until the meeting's over, and then they're like, oh, do I really have to take the headset off? We've had a couple key personnel on the job site from the owner side who have probably spent in excess of 20 hours in the virtual reality environment, touring other people through, having these conversations. And so it's been a very powerful tool, and it's a very subtle shift of kind of what the goal is in that collaboration and making sure it was easy and smooth to have multiple people in the environment working together at the same time. And so this is probably where the most of our research and our time has been spent lately, is how do we make this better? How do we make it easier and kind of keep going with these large scale collaborative sessions? Almost to the end now. I've been talking about VR this whole time. And so maybe it's time to talk a little bit about AR and how you might see that play out in a construction site. And I don't have as many examples of this. We've played with it a little bit, and we've seen some of the possibilities, and mostly we're just kind of in a waiting pattern. So this one project that I do want to bring up kind of shows a little bit of what that marker localization looks like. So this was at the University of Washington for a new building. And the need that we are looking at here is this building was going to go between two existing buildings and really cut off a lot of the flow of traffic. And so the team was worried about how would the campus react to this, as basically this switchover would happen over winter. So the goal was, well, if we go ahead and make the students get excited about this, or help the students get excited by seeing what's going to be there, seeing with what the possibilities are, we might be able to mitigate some of those emotions. And so there's different locations installed all around the job site where you could download an app, hold out your phone or your iPad, and look at the job site through that and see this final building with a couple different locations where you could actually click on those and teleport into a classroom or the lobby and look around and see renderings. So it was actually a merging of two different technologies, the 3 degree of freedom photospheres and this video pass through AR, and kind of used interchangeably, and you can bring them back and forth. And it was a pretty cool project. We've done stuff similar to this many times, so I won't kind of show all of them, but that's been the main use that we've seen for the video pass through. If it's inside of a building, it starts to become a little bit harder and starts to look more just like AR or VR, as everything's shown in the building. But when you're standing this far back, you can really start to see context and what your sight lines might be, and how the building lines up with the rest of the physical world. So that's the end of my slide deck. As I said earlier, you can always reach out to me. Let's see if I can go all the way to the beginning of the slide and throw my name out there. If anybody wants to connect with me over LinkedIn or anything like that, ask questions there. I'm always excited and happy to talk more about extended realities or different emerging technologies inside our industry.